Chinese orphan who became an American Civil War hero. Part 3, The American Frontier, Chapter 13. Westward. The Civil War was over, but for the United States Army, the mission continued. The nation was expanding westward at a breathtaking pace. Railroads pushed across the Great Plains. Settlers established new towns. Military forts stretched from Texas to the Dakotas. For Edward de Cohota, the Army had become more than a profession. It had become his home. Rather than returning permanently to civilian life, he re-enlisted in the regular Army. Over the next 3 decades, he would serve in distant outposts scattered across the American frontier. The assignments were rarely glamorous. Long patrols across endless prairie, guard duty through freezing winters, escorting supply wagons over rough terrain, repairing buildings, training recruits, maintaining discipline in isolated forts where boredom could be as dangerous as the occasional outbreak of violence. Unlike the great Civil War battles, frontier service seldom produced headlines. Yet it demanded endurance. For month after month, year after year, Edward quietly fulfilled every duty asked of him. Chapter 14. Fort Randall. One of Edward's most important assignments brought him to Fort Randall in what is now South Dakota. The Missouri River flowed nearby. The fort stood as one of the Army's key outposts on the northern plains. Here, soldiers lived far from the growing cities of the East. Supplies arrived by riverboat. Winters were harsh. Summers were blistering. Life settled into a steady rhythm of inspections, drills, repairs, and patrols. Yet history occasionally arrived at the fort's gates. One of the prisoners held there was Sitting Bull, the renowned Hunkpapa Lakota leader. After years of conflict and exile, Sitting Bull was confined at Fort Randall before eventually being released. Among the soldiers assigned to guard him was Edward de Cohota. History offers no record of conversations between the two men. Perhaps they never spoke. Perhaps they exchanged only brief glances. But their presence within the same walls tells its own story. One had crossed the Pacific as an orphan. The other had fought to preserve his people's homeland. Both stood at the crossroads of a rapidly changing America. Chapter 15. Love on the frontier military forts were not only places of duty, they were communities. Families gathered for dances, children played along dusty parade grounds, church services brought soldiers and civilians together. It was during these years that Edward met Anna Dorothea Halstensen, a Norwegian immigrant. Like Edward, Anna had crossed an ocean in search of a better future. Their journeys had begun on opposite sides of the world, one from China, the other from Norway. Both found themselves on the American frontier. They married in 1883. For Edward, the wedding represented more than the beginning of married life. It completed a journey that had begun nearly 40 years earlier aboard the Cohota. The orphan who once possessed nothing now had a wife, a home, and the promise of a future built together. Chapter 16. A family children soon filled the Cohota household. Lucy, Edward, Elizabeth, William, Daisy, and finally, Miles. 6 children. Their laughter echoed through Army quarters and later through homes across Nebraska. Edward had known almost nothing of his own childhood family. His children's lives would be different. He encouraged education, hard work, honesty, discipline, the same values Captain Sergeant Day had instilled in him decades earlier. Every generation quietly passed those lessons to the next. Although military service often required long separations, Edward remained devoted to his growing family. The man who had once crossed the Pacific alone had created a family rooted firmly in America. Chapter 17. The Kangaroo Restaurant. After retiring from the Army in the mid-1890s, Edward entered an entirely different kind of service. He became an entrepreneur. Settling in Valentine, Nebraska, he opened the Kangaroo Restaurant. Travelers, cowboys, railroad workers, local families, all passed through its doors. Some knew the proprietor had once worn the Union blue. Many simply knew him as a hard-working businessman who welcomed customers with quiet dignity. Edward later worked as a baker and also operated a livery stable. His willingness to adapt reflected a lifetime spent overcoming obstacles. He had survived an ocean voyage. He had survived the Civil War. Learning a new trade was simply another challenge to be met. The American dream seemed finally within reach. A respected veteran, a successful businessman, a father raising 6 American children. It appeared that Edward de Cohota had built the life he had long deserved. Chapter 18. Loss. Then tragedy struck once again. In 1899, Anna died. She was still a relatively young woman. Their youngest son, Miles, had only recently been born. The loss devastated the family. Edward had endured war. He had endured hardship. But grief inside one's own home was another kind of battle entirely. Friends and neighbors helped where they could. Yet much of the burden fell upon Edward himself. He was now both father and mother to 6 children. There are no surviving letters describing his sorrow, no diary revealing his private thoughts. But every parent understands the weight of such loss. Once again, the orphan who had overcome so much found himself facing another chapter alone. Chapter 19. Fire. Just when stability seemed restored, disaster arrived without warning. Fire swept through the Kangaroo Restaurant. Years of labor disappeared in smoke and flames. For many people, such a loss would have marked the end. For Edward, it became another beginning. He rebuilt, started again, worked again, persevered again. His life had become a series of impossible setbacks, followed by determined recoveries. This quiet resilience would define him far more than any single battle fought during the Civil War. Chapter 20. An American in every way. By the opening years of the 20th century, Edward de Cohota seemed to embody everything Americans admired. He had served his country faithfully, raised a family, operated successful businesses, earned the respect of his neighbors. Veterans saluted him as one of their own. Children knew him as a kindly father. His life reflected ideals celebrated across the nation: duty, perseverance, self-reliance, service. Yet beneath this outward success lay a painful truth that Edward himself had never fully confronted. He believed he was an American in every meaningful sense. Soon, he would discover that the law believed otherwise. The greatest battle of his life would not be fought with a rifle. It would be fought with documents, courts, and an unjust law that cared nothing for courage or sacrifice. To be continued.